Now this is the Dangbei DBOX02 Pro projector. It's essentially a real laser 4K projector, but in a portable form factor. Essentially this gives you the flexibility of most of those budget-friendly portable projectors that we see on Amazon all the time, but with an actually good image, with a native 4K resolution, as well as the benefits of laser projection. On top of all that, you have AI-powered features, including auto keystone correction, autofocus, obstacle avoidance, as well as smart eye protection. Additionally, with full licensed Google TV built inside, you essentially don't need any cables and only need a power cord. That means that you can pretty much set this thing up anywhere you go, whether you're in a small apartment, bedroom, living room, or even outside. Now, just before we get into the projector itself, I want to talk about the key differences between laser projectors and your standard lamp-based projectors. Typically, with laser projectors, you get much better life expectancy, all the way up from 20,000 to 30,000 hours in terms of operation, compared to DLP style lamps that last between 3,000 to 5,000 hours. That's certainly a big benefit. On top of that, you'll have better contrast ratios as well as brightness levels on some of these laser projectors compared to lamp-based projectors on the lower end spectrum anyways, and you get better contrast ratio with better brightness, so you can use them in brighter lit conditions. This specifically has a luminosity rating of about 2,000 lumens. Furthermore, with some laser projectors, they can be short throw, so you can essentially use them as a laser TV projector. So you essentially have a base that projects up to 120-inch image at a very short throw distance. This is a traditional long throw style projector, so you're going to be a couple of feet away to get that 120-inch size, and even a longer distance if you want to go up to the maximum 300-inch screen size. Another big benefit is faster startup times. With this projector, I can get up and running in about 4 to 5 seconds, which is pretty incredible considering back in the day with my old DLP style, I could wait up to like 45 seconds to get an image up. So certainly a big progress in technology there. Furthermore, with this specific laser projector, it runs extremely quiet. Pretty much near silent in terms of most ambient noise environments, anywhere between 40 to 45 decibels. On top of all that, it is also more power efficient and runs cooler, which is only going to help in terms of power efficiency and longevity. Now, in terms of some of the downsides, probably the biggest one has to be the price point. Most laser projectors are pretty expensive to mass produce, so they typically go for a couple of $1,000s. Now, as the technology has progressed, they've certainly become more affordable, where this is kind of at the affordable spectrum of just around that $1,600 mark. But typically with most native 4K laser projectors, you could easily spend $2,000 to $5,000 and not be in the top end spec. Another con is if you're going to compare it to a proper television, certainly an OLED, you're not going to get the same dynamic contrast ratio or black levels, and pretty much no projector can at this point unless you're willing to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, and even that is still not going to produce the dynamic contrast and black levels as a typical OLED TV. Now moving forward, let's talk about the design of this thing. You can see that it's on a swivel pedestal. It's kind of like a gimbal where you have 2 axes of control. The pedestal part can actually rotate 360 degrees, and you have about 120 degrees of angle of tilt. So no matter where you're going to place this projector in your space, whatever vantage point, it will automatically set the specific keystone with its built-in correction, and is very flexible in terms of where you want to physically place the projector, whether it's on a tabletop surface, somewhere off the side, and even on a ceiling mount. The only caveat is you do need to get a specific ceiling mount for this projector, since it doesn't come with standardized holes at the bottom. The build quality on the stand itself is actually excellent. It's made of mostly steel components within the pivot points themselves. They have a nice satisfying clicky sound, and once you have the projector placed, it is very stable and doesn't move around too much and can't be really knocked over. Now, as far as the external design from the front, you can see we have the main laser projector with the lens at the front over there. We also have an optical and IR sensor to do most of the auto calibration, as well as communicate with the remote. The remote itself is typical of most Google TV style remotes, very simple in terms of controls. You have buttons for your main power voice commands, navigational, as well as dedicated buttons for YouTube, Netflix, and Amazon Video Prime, as well as volume up and down buttons. On the side, you have one red button, which if you long press will initiate the autofocusing capabilities of the projector. And if you short press it, you can do manual fine adjustments for your focus. The autofocusing system actually works quite well, and I rarely need to tune it manually. Although if you want to make sure that your image is as sharp as possible, you want to definitely double check to do so, since most autofocusing systems, depending upon situations, can get it wrong, especially given just a few tries. The other side button is actually your main menu button for the projector itself. Here you can actually control many of the aspects of the projector, including the focusing and image control, where most of your keystone settings are, whether you're doing the auto keystone correction, where it will automatically square up the image depending upon where you have it projected from. You can also do manual keystone correction, so if you want to do something specific, that is very doable. On top of all that, you also can find things like obstacle avoidance, where it will actively avoid obstacles being projected directly in front of it. This typically results in a smaller image, but it's cool to have this feature nonetheless. Additionally, you also have the screen fit setting. So if you're using a screen, it will automatically detect the black borders and fit the projector specifically around that display. And this works pretty flawlessly based on my experience. Now on the left and right side of the projector, you have two 12-watt speakers with a 600cc cavity for better amplified acoustics. This is basically a stereo Bluetooth speaker that you can use independently if you need to, but basically a utilitarian speaker just in case you don't have any other audio system. It gives you adequate enough bass response and decent amount of presence to get you through whatever you're watching without using an external speaker source. And you can also virtualize Dolby Digital Surround Sound with the two stereo channels, and it's a passable audio experience to say none the least. It's mostly utilitarian in terms of its sound quality, and I would definitely recommend, if you're serious into replicating actually good cinema sound, to get a dedicated speaker system or a good soundbar. There's also Bluetooth 5.2 built into the Google TV interface, and you can pair it up with different accessories, including a headset. Unfortunately, you can't use more than one headset at a time for outputting your audio, which is kind of upsetting if you want to watch something silently with your family and friends with multiple Bluetooth headset. That's more of a limitation of Google TV than anything else. Now, coming around to the back of the projector, you're going to find a decent amount of connectivity options, including two full-size HDMI 2.1 connections, one with eARC support for your audio output. On top of that, you also have two USB Type-A connections, as well as an optical audio connection and a headphone jack. You can also use the built-in Wi-Fi for all your internet connectivity for your Google TV, but if you don't have good Wi-Fi, you also have Ethernet connectivity as well for a wired LAN connection. And the power connection is actually integrated into the stand itself on the right-hand side. Now, as far as the image quality goes, based on my experience of projecting on my bedroom wall, which is not using a dedicated screen, just basically a wall that's painted flat white, which is actually pretty decent for the most part. And I also added some black borders just to give a better presentation. And I found in terms of the sharpness and clarity, you are getting that native 4K resolution, so pretty much no visible pixels once you're about 5 feet away from the screen. And my screen size was around 100 inches, so fairly large screen size and superb quality with the 4K resolution. In terms of the actual color contrast, it was honestly pretty decent for the projection surface itself. Since I'm not using a dedicated screen, I can't be too critical about the overall contrast ratio and color dynamics, but based on what I'm seeing so far, it's definitely a very passable and a pretty pleasant experience, especially when just lying down and watching some of your favorite content at a large screen right in your bedroom. Now, this can reproduce the Rec. 709 color space by over 108%, and it is full certified for HDR10+, and the overall color reproduction as far as HDR content goes is fairly excellent. Now, as far as the brightness goes, this is rated for up to 2000 lumens, but in the normal mode, you're just around that 1500 lumen mark, and it is very quiet in its operation at that brightness level. Basically around 40 to 44 decibels, which is pretty much ambient noise based on my environment right now. So it's whisper quiet. Once you have it in high performance brightness mode, it goes up to 60 decibels, and the brightness level doesn't really perceivably change all that much. Yes, it does get brighter, but the trade-off for the extra noise is not really worth it for the extra brightness, and I would only use high performance mode if you're going to blow up the image up to 200 to 300 inches, maybe in an outdoor environment. Now, as far as gaming goes, this projector has a setting called MEMC, and set in its high position, it can actually interpolate the refresh rate up to 240 Hertz with a 1080p video source. So you certainly can use it to play some games, and even though the latency is relatively high, and like most projectors, up to 30 milliseconds, which is definitely not going to be good if you're a competitive gamer, but pretty passable gaming experience, and certainly very good for just playing some Mario Kart on the big screen. Furthermore, you also have 3D capabilities. I unfortunately don't have any specific 3D content or glasses to test that out with, but this projector does have that capability if you're interested in watching some 3D content. Now, as far as the Google TV interface goes, it's pretty much Google TV. You have all the built-in streaming apps with full Netflix licensing, as well as licensing for Apple TV, Disney Plus, YouTube, Twitch, Amazon Video Prime, etc. And you can download different apps using the Google TV Play Store. And the overall operation of the Google TV is very fast and fluid. Now, in summary, I just want to go over through the pros and cons of this Dangbei projector. And probably my biggest gripe has to do with the fact that it doesn't have standard mounting points if you want to mount it on a ceiling. I think the image quality is definitely worth it for a dedicated home theater space, and with the added flexibility of the stand, it makes it very easy to adjust, even if it's upside down in that ceiling position. You do have to get a dedicated ceiling mount, and the power connection is routed through the stand itself. So everything is very tightly integrated. You can't really remove it from the stand or the gimbal itself, since it's all in one package. So it is limited in terms of that regard. Of course, you can still mount it on the ceiling, but you just have to get the specific mount for it. The other thing I don't like is the remote control is not backlit. And that's with many of the projectors I've encountered throughout the past couple of years. When you're using it in the ideal circumstance, which is going to be in a dimly lit situation, you can obviously memorize the actual button layout, and it's simple enough to do so. But if you're using it and unfamiliar with the button layout, it's kind of frustrating to go through the remote, which is not backlit. The last issue I have is just with projectors in general. Now, certainly laser projectors do have a generally better contrast ratio and a decent level of brightness. And if you have a proper screen that can actually boost some of the contrast and luminosity of your projector, you can certainly use it in a brightly lit ambient environment. It's never going to give you the same exact experience as a dedicated TV, certainly with QLED and OLED TVs, which have incredible brightness levels and infinite black levels. It's going to be hard to compete with that versatility on really any projector. Now, moving forward, let's talk about the pros. And the biggest pro has to be the ease of use. You pretty much have a very minimal barrier to entry. You take it out of the box, you put it on a tabletop surface, you plug it in, and as long as you have a wall that's white, you're ready to go. You really don't need anything else but that. And once you're up and running, you have a 4K image that rivals the theater in terms of sharpness and clarity. And with the wide color gamma and HDR10+ certification, you certainly get excellent color reproduction. Furthermore, this is probably the quietest projector I've ever encountered, and I've been using projectors for over 20 years now, and I'm super stunned of how awesome the image quality is and how silent in terms of the operation is. It's pretty much a TV in terms of its ambient noise, especially in regular brightness mode. On top of all that, it is also super power efficient, runs very cool, and has all the added benefits of being a laser projector, including its long life. So if you're going to run this thing all day like a TV, you can certainly do so. But really, on that, guys, that's really it. I'd love to know what you guys think of laser projectors in general. Do you think they're worth it compared to standard projectors? And do you think they're the future of projection in general? And I want to make a huge shout out to Dangbei for giving us the opportunity to test this thing out. We wanted to test out laser technology for the longest time and finally got that opportunity. So I'm going to use the heck out of this thing for the long term. If you have any specific questions, again, let me know. Make sure you have post notifications turned on. Check out the description down below for everything we've talked about, and have a great day and like the video. We'll see you real soon. Take care.